today's critical cultural competency training. Mr. Robert Patrick, Director of Operations for the Office of Income Maintenance, Ms. Wah Pham, Director of the Bureau of Employment Programs, Ms. Charlotte Fry, State Refugee Coordinator for the Bureau of Policy, Mr. Keith Heffel, who has introduced himself, but again, I'll repeat, the Program Advisor for the Bureau of Employment Programs, and of course, the dedicated group of individuals from the International Rescue Committee and the Nationalities Service Center in Philadelphia, who you are about to meet. The purpose of today's training is to better equip you with the resources and knowledge about Afghan cultural competency to ensure meaningful and successful interaction between you and the recent and ongoing influx of Afghan refugees across the Commonwealth. All of the materials and resources discussed during today's presentation will be made available on the Staff Development website in the Spotlight under the title Afghan Cultural Competency by close of business this Friday, January 14th. I will send every one of you an email advising you when the materials have been posted. As Keith indicated, there will be a question and answer period at the end of today's training, and I urge you, please do not hesitate to ask your questions at that time. Your questions and the answers provided by this team will help you to interact positively and culturally competently with the Afghan refugees who are in need of our life-saving and preserving benefits. Thank you for your time and participation in this meeting. And now, please welcome Ms. Tiana Gonzalez.
Great, thank you, Keith and Kevin. And I just want to reiterate Keith's sentiments of thanking all of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us today. I know it's really not easy to step aside from your busy day-to-day work lives for trainings, especially right now, given how busy you are helping this population. So I just want to thank you for being here today to learn more about those that you are serving from Afghanistan. I encourage everyone to turn off their emails, anything that might distract you, and try to be very engaged in our training today. So my name is Tiana Gonzalez, and I am the Senior Community Orientation Officer at the Cultural Orientation Resource Exchange, or CORE. So I provide technical assistance to community partners, sponsors, and volunteers that support the delivery of cultural orientation. I have 9 years of experience in refugee resettlement work. My work has included direct case management with a majority Afghan population in the state of Maryland, program design, and curriculum development. I've also worked with 3 resettlement agencies, the Ethiopian Community Development Council, highest headquarters, and now the International Rescue Committee at CORE. So my expertise is really in volunteer coordination, employment programming, and digital literacy education. My colleague Manar Maroof is also joining us today. Manar supports CORE's capacity building initiatives, which include managing training delivery and resource development for cultural orientation providers that support the Afghan Placement Assistance Program. So Manar brings more than 10 years of experience in education, women's rights, and human rights, including 6 years in refugee resettlement, implementing cultural orientation programming. She has a dual master's in sustainable international development and coexistence and conflict from Brandeis University and is a native speaker of Arabic. So today Manar is going to be monitoring the chat and facilitating the Q&A panel session that we will be having at the end of today's call. We also have colleagues joining from NSC, one of the local resettlement agencies in Philadelphia, who I will introduce later on. Perfect. So let's start by reviewing some of the key points about today's session. So first, as stated earlier, this webinar is being recorded. The recording and other resources discussed on the call will be shared after the session. You will receive a post-webinar email from me with training materials and other relevant resources, so there's no need to be taking notes. I will be providing those after the webinar. Since this training is 2 hours, we will take a 10-minute break in the middle of the session so everyone can take care of personal needs, stretch your legs. Lastly, your participation really matters. So we encourage you to type questions into the chat box throughout the presentation and participate in the activities that we have during today's presentation. Manar, as I said, will be monitoring the chat, and she will circle back to questions that I do not answer during the presentation section of today's call when she facilitates the Q&A panel session of today's call. So today we will be using the raise your hand and chat feature in Microsoft Teams. You'll see an image on this slide that shows you how to find those two features on your screen. So we're going to do a small activity right now where we're going to practice the raise your hand feature, which you can see is this icon at the bottom of the screen. So I want to learn a little bit more about everyone who's in the room today. So we'll be using that raise your hand feature, and between questions, please remember to lower your hand. So I'm going to pull up my participants so I could see how people answer these questions. I want you to raise your hand if you are familiar with refugees and other immigrant populations. I think almost everyone is raising their hand. Oh, I see 26 people, 31, 32. Great, thank you. So it seems about half of you are familiar with this population. Okay, so question number 2, if we can all lower our hands. Question number 2, I am familiar with refugee resettlement services. So keep your hand up or re-raise your hand if you are familiar with the refugee resettlement services. Okay, so about the same number of people. So I would say half the group is who are familiar with refugees and other immigrant populations also know about resettlement services. All right, lower your hands again. And the last question, I am familiar with Afghan populations and culture. Please raise your hand or keep it raised if this applies to you. So only about 15 people. So it seems like Keith and Kevin did a great job at choosing the topic for today's webinar. I really hope that you will take a lot from this presentation about Afghan populations and culture and consider it in what half of you already know about refugee resettlement services and information about immigrant populations. So if we can all lower our hands. So by the end of today's presentation, I'm hoping that all of you on today's call will understand the resettlement process for families from Afghanistan that are arriving to the United States, that you will be comfortable applying social and cultural knowledge about newcomers from Afghanistan to your service delivery. You will know how to integrate key cultural orientation messages into services, and you will be prepared to introduce families from Afghanistan to CORE's resources. So let's begin by reviewing what is cultural orientation and who is the Cultural Orientation Resource Exchange. All right, so what is cultural orientation? Cultural orientation provides newcomers with the vital knowledge, skills, and attitudes that are needed to adapt to their new lives and achieve self-sufficiency. In this session, you will learn about the process of cultural orientation, including the content that's covered and the roles of community partners in its implementation. Cultural orientation is an iterative process. This begins overseas and it is continued once newcomers arrive to the United States. Newcomers will hear the same information many times during the process. So throughout, you're going to experience firsthand some of the strategies used by cultural orientation providers to deliver CO messages in an engaging manner that will enhance information retention amongst newcomers. So in the chat box, I'd like you to type what topics do you think are covered in cultural orientations? I've said this word a lot. It's going to be one of the main things we talk about. What is cultural orientation? But what topics are covered? If you can type your answers in the chat box. Great, so we have some questions coming in. Politeness, transportation, self-sufficiency. Great, keep typing any ideas that you have of what might be covered in cultural orientation. We have the job search, what services are available, community resources, language and communication, school. ESL, school registration, health screening, language barriers. Great, so these are all topics covered in cultural orientation. That idea of politeness is covered when we talk about cultural adjustment. So it's really, what do you expect from life in the United States? What might that be like? So you could see how expansive cultural orientation is and what we're talking about in it. So cultural orientation reviews a predetermined list of topics. Some of those cultural orientation topics include the role of the resettlement agency, employment, housing, education, health and hygiene, community services, learning English, rights and responsibilities, US laws, money management, a lot of what everyone has included in the chat here. So refugees generally receive cultural orientation before traveling to the United States, and they also receive it at their final destination by resettlement agencies. Overseas cultural orientation focuses on information applicable across all states, while domestic cultural orientation provides more locally specific information. So for the full list of topics that are reviewed both overseas and domestically, and the learning points that are discussed under those topics, you can look at the cultural orientation objectives and indicators, which my colleague Minar has posted in the chat. Okay, so I want to watch a brief video that will describe where CORE fits into all of this. I'm going to have to reshare my screen. So just give me one moment for the sake of an issue we're having today with technology.
Are you new to refugee resettlement? Looking to learn new skills? Or supervising others? The Cultural Orientation Resource Exchange is here for you. CORE connects and supports resettlement staff globally to deliver effective cultural orientation to refugees coming to the United States. From pre-departure to arrival, refugees have a lot of information to learn and navigate. In response, CORE provides resettlement staff with teaching tips, course materials, and trainings. And for refugees, CORE delivers reliable translated resources on getting started in America. All of this is with one goal in mind: providing refugees with the tools they need to achieve self-sufficiency.
Perfect. Well, thank you for bearing with me during that headset exchange. And I hope that brief video helped share some insight about who CORE is. So we'll talk a little bit more about CORE's newcomer-facing resources towards the end of today's presentation. So I'm going to move into a discussion around resettlement services for families from Afghanistan. So using the chat box again, I want you to consider the following question. After learning a little bit about what cultural orientation is, in your opinion, what question is most commonly asked by newcomers? So if you can type your answers in the chat box. What question do you think is most commonly being asked by newcomers who are arriving from Afghanistan as it relates to orientation? I like the question, where do we start? Because I think we can ask ourselves that too. People have so many questions. So where do we start with thinking about this? We have some other questions coming in. How much do common household items and groceries cost? So what is the cost of living? What's housing? Where will we live? How will you continue their education? That's a wonderful one. It's something we hear a lot with the population we're working with and talking about today. Housing again, employment, where do we go from here? So we have these larger questions that we're talking about here that are coming into the chat of what's next? We just went through all of the of leaving your country. What's going to happen? How do I improve my English? When do I get to see a doctor? So some of the common questions that we're hearing is, what is my immigration status? A question I'm going to move into talking a little bit about as we say with the evacuation from Afghanistan. But really, where will I live? What is my housing? That's the most common question we're hearing. How will I find a job? What public assistance will I receive? So even in the chat box, we're seeing all these questions come in around all the range of topics. And you need to consider, what questions would you have if you had to leave your home and resettle to this new place where you didn't know the culture? And it's immense. When you have to restart your life, there's so many questions that you want answered. Great, thank you, everyone. So since 2008, special immigrant visa holders, or SIV holders from Afghanistan, have been resettled through the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program. Afghan SIV holders did not receive pre-departure cultural orientation previously because their visa applications were processed at the U.S. Embassy. So after the Taliban returned and reintroduced strict controls on personal freedoms, like the right to education and the rights of women, girls, and minorities, a mass exodus prompted the U.S. and other international governments to carry out a rapid evacuation process. So Operation Allies Welcome is an interagency effort that's led by the Department of Homeland Security. It began in July 2021 to support the emergency evacuation of Afghan allies during the drawdown of US troops. So since then, more than 100,000 individuals have evacuated from Afghanistan and were granted immigration status as either an SIV holder, humanitarian parolee. So parole status is granted for a period of 2 years. Humanitarian parolees from Afghanistan have access to services from resettlement agencies, and they qualify for other federal benefits. However, unlike SIV status, parole does not provide a path to legal immigration status, and parolees will need to work with an immigration lawyer to pursue permanent immigration status. So today, many Afghan families are awaiting US resettlement at military safe havens, both overseas and domestically. At this time, 8 safe havens remain open, and orientation is offered at safe havens in Doha, Bondsteel, and the 6 military bases located in the United States. So for more information about Operation Allies Welcome, you can refer to Homeland Security's website, which Manar has posted in the chat for all of you. So as I just mentioned, America's military supported evacuation efforts, arranging for Afghan families to reach safe havens from the Taliban. At these safe havens, the Afghan newcomers complete medical screenings and other important processing steps. If housed at a US-based safe haven, Afghan families choose to either wait for the International Organization of Migration, or IOM, to book them a flight to their final destination, or they choose to independently depart the safe havens. If they wait for their IOM flight, IOM loans the family the money for the flight, but the family must repay this loan. These families are also connected to a local resettlement agency who meets them at the airport and provides initial resettlement services. So most families choose to wait for an IOM flight booking. However, those that choose to depart the safe havens on their own must cover the full cost of their flight, and they are not guaranteed initial resettlement services from a local resettlement. We refer to this as independent or voluntary departures, and this is a really important concept for all of you on today's call to understand. So while those Afghan newcomers that independently depart the safe havens can ask a local resettlement agency for help, it is not guaranteed, especially in locations where the resettlement agencies are assisting a large number of Afghans that are already placed in these locations. This is really common right in places like Sacramento, California, and along Northern Virginia. So as such, those families who choose to independently depart may be responsible for providing their own basic needs and connecting to other services like county assistance offices on their own. So for more information on Afghanistan, you can refer to CORE's Afghan Backgrounder. So I see a question in the chat asking, are those who opt to independently depart typically who already have family members or friends residing in the US? I can't answer that because I don't have the numbers on the decision making of people who independently depart, but in the heart of what the US Refugee Admissions Program is, it is a family reunification program. So people at safe havens, priority location they have is where their direct immediate family members are living. So those who have family members somewhere in Pennsylvania will receive support from IOM to go to Pennsylvania, or they could independently depart to Pennsylvania. I would say the main reason people are leaving the safe havens independently is because they've been there for a very long time. As I said earlier, the evacuation process and Operation Allies began in June. It's now January. So this operation has been going on for quite a few months already. Great question, Elizabeth. So County Assistance Office staff are serving as the gateway to early resettlement services for newcomers who are not connected to a resettlement agency or other service provider options like sponsorship. Okay, so I introduced a new word, sponsorship. Sponsorship is a new resettlement initiative that began specifically to support Afghan newcomers. It's an alternative to a resettlement agency. I'm not going to go into the specifics of this program today due to time constraints, and we could spend a long time talking about it, but I introduced it because I really want everyone to understand that not every family from Afghanistan may be working with a resettlement agency or sponsor or other service provider. So resettlement agencies really need your help to introduce Afghans to the resources that are available to help them during their adjustment. So on today's call, we're going to review the multilingual cultural orientation resources that you can introduce to newcomers from Afghanistan. Those cultural orientation resources prepare Afghan families to navigate American systems and integrate them into their new communities, so that those Afghans that choose to independently depart the bases are told that it might be multiple months before they connect to a resettlement agency. For these individuals, self-study of cultural orientation may be the only way to receive some of these important messages. So what is an important message? So for a concrete example of a CO topic, a CO indicator that's very important, in cultural orientation, we review the requirement for young men to register for selective service. So failure to learn or accomplish this US responsibility can impact that young man's ability to work certain jobs in the future or apply for financial assistance in school. And that's why it's so important that all of you are playing a role in introducing these newcomers to CORE's resources that I'll review in a little bit. But for right now, I want to move into discussing some social and cultural information to cultivate a general understanding of newcomer families arriving to the US from Afghanistan. So for this section of today's presentation, Nick and some of his colleagues from Nationalities Service Center are going to be presenting. So I'm going to hand it over to them now. Nick works as an interpreter and wellness liaison at NSC. He has experience working as a cultural advisor and linguistics instructor in central Afghanistan with the American military and defense contractors. So Nick, I welcome you to introduce yourself, start your presentation with your colleagues.
Thank you very much, Diana. Thank you for your presentation. So let me to introduce briefly myself. My name is Nick Ahmadi. I'm living in Philadelphia for 20 years. I was working when I was in Afghanistan with a non-profit organization. We were there for inside Afghanistan and also in Pakistan for the refugees. And since I'm here, I work with U.S. military in different bases as a cultural advisor and also as a language instructor. Since August, I'm working with the NEC as an interpreter and also with as a wellness liaison. So also as a cultural broker with Afghan refugee. So today, my colleagues Riyasat Ali and Pashtun Dior also will be in the panel on the loop they will help me in some area if I need their helps. So as far as I know that when we are talking about the cultural issues of a country like Afghanistan, so it will take a lot of time to talk or to touch all those points or important things that Afghan people has in their life. But I'm not gonna go through all of those. Just I'm gonna touch for some of those important cultural values which the Afghan people have it. It will help us while we are providing service for these people. We have to consider along our works. So first of all, Afghanistan has a diverse society and it has a rich cultural tradition because it is located in the Central Asia, and it was the crossroad between so many superpowers over there. And also before the Islam, there was another religious. So all these things make it rich, the culture of those people. So if you think from the invade of Alexander the Great to Great Britain and from the Soviet Union invasion to the US recently, all these things is also impacted on the socio-economic and also on the culture of Afghanistan. But I'm not going to go detail on those things. And I'm just going to touch on some of the important cultural issues which we have in Afghanistan. First of all, Afghanistan is a large landlocked country. It is, as I said, it is located in the South Asia, and it is home for several different ethnic groups, language, religion, and culture. We have almost 17 or more than 17 ethnic groups. It is Pashtun, Tajik, Hazara, Uzbek, Turkmen, Baluch, Pashai, Nuristani, Aymaq, Arab, Kyrgyz, Qizilbash, Gujar, Barawi, and Sayed, and other tribes. But there is four more major ethnic groups, which is Pashtun, Tajik, Hazara, and Uzbek. So they are the majority ethnic group in Afghanistan. And we have two official languages in the country, which is Pashto and Dari. So I think that Dari is the predominant language in the country because it is all educated Afghan, they can speak Dari, and so also Pashto language is more common in the south, and the rest of the country they are speaking Dari and their own language as well. Afghanistan is also mostly a tribal society with different regions of the country. It's having its own subcultures. It means the people, if they are living in different region, and they also have their subcultures too. And nearly all Afghan follow Islamic traditions, celebrate the same holidays like Eid of Ramadan, Eid Qurban, New Year's like we call Nowruz, which is on March 21st. That is equal to the first day of spring in the United States. Afghan also, they are dressing the same, slightly different from cities to the urban areas, to the rural areas. It is depending where you live, especially among the female. Some of them is the clothes is different, but the men segment, they are using the same clothes. And also, Afghan people is using the same food, which is we call halal. So all over the country, the people is using the halal food, and so we don't have like unhalal food over there. They are listening the same music almost, and celebrating the same holidays, which is official in Afghanistan. So it means most of the Afghan culture, it is mixed of religion of Islam and also their tradition. Islam is almost expression of Afghan culture or shaped by a deep-rooted belief in the Islamic religion, the Afghan people, I think. So Afghan culture is very collectivist. This is very important. We have to know that. So even I am living in the United States, but I have this, my home. Afghan culture is very collectivist, and people generally put their family interest before their own. So if you ask any Afghan people if they are evacuated recently, these people are still thinking about their families who left behind. So it means that family responsibilities tend to hold a greater importance than a person needs. This is very important. We should know loyalty to your own family is kind of obligations. So any part of the family, they have to have, the loyalty to their families. If you are living in a tribal areas, beside to it is your obligation to be loyal with your family, you have to be loyal with your tribe. You have to be loyal onto your ethnicity. So if you are living not in urban areas, in the rural areas, it is very important. If you are not loyal, so it is hard for you to have, a good reputation among your family or your society. The other things I think which is very important we have to know about that, it is through all Afghan, 95% of Afghan family, they are trying to solve the family issues internally. Family matters are kept strictly private. People are often reluctant to share personal issues with non-family members. As a community knowledge of family struggling can bring shame on the household. So they don't like to share if they have anything within their family. They don't like to share with other people because it is gonna be shame for the family if there is anything goes wrong within their family. If they cannot solve their internal issues, they prefer to refer or convey the issues to the elders of their tribe, or refer to their close friends It means before they go to file claim or call to the police or make an official cases to the government, all Afghan families, as I mentioned in the beginning, it is 95% of the Afghan people, they prefer to solve the matters within their families. So if they cannot solve the issues within their families, then they refer to the elders, to the neighbors. And if it is a large issues, then they make a jirga. Jirga has it has a long history in the country. So they bring elders from different areas. If it is a matter, something very bigger than the families or the elder of their tribe, they cannot solve it, then they make a jirga, and they are going to solve that problem before they are going to file to the government. If they cannot solve the problem, then finally they refer or they are going to file to the government. The other things which I remember is all members of the family have a financial responsibilities. So if you are 4, 5, 10 people working in your house, you have your financial responsibility and contributing to the finance of the household directly or indirectly. So in Afghanistan, male members of the household may exclusively manage household financials. However, most of Afghan families, discussing their financial issues between a spouse, between wife and husband. So for the internal financial, for the household internal financial, wife has a bigger role. So the father of the head of the family, the man of the family, they are working and they are bringing money in home, but the wife of the family, they are good. She's a good manager. She's working. She's bring all the other financial management to within the family. They have control in the family financial issues. She make the decision what they should eat, what kind of food they should bring it, how many people they can invite it, what kind of clothes the girls or the boys they needed to be bought and to purchase from market. So it means for the financials, both a father or mother, they both have equal responsibility, and they are making a joint decision. If you are going to buy either a car or a land or a house, the mother role is very important. So,
Mr. Nick, do you mind if I add some more points?
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Hello, my name is Riyasat Ali. I am cultural orientation assistant here in NSC. Is it possible to move to the slide, Tiana, to the family dynamics? Because I think Mr. Nick has already covered the gender dynamics here and the language considerations. Awesome. So I think exactly, family dynamics. Yeah. So in Afghanistan, as Mr. Nick pointed out, families. A good example would be how the family dynamic plays out is it's a classic example of how throughout the centuries we have seen governments or countries invading Afghanistan and hoping by replacing it with a puppet government that people will follow them. But in the reality, what Afghanistan is basically is subunits of families that eventually become, as you can say, cell and then a body and eventually form a government. And if you do not belong from that subunit, and if you did not rise from that subunit, not everybody will accept you. And hence the governments do not survive in Afghanistan. So I think family dynamics plays a big role in here. Just like a man plays sort of like the front of the house, or as you can say, the face of the house, the women basically are the back end of the house. And that's how it is. And there's a common misperception about women right in Afghanistan, but eventually, at least in my family, what we used to say was, my father was the president, but my mom was basically the capitalist government that was behind it, because that's how they ran the family, and that's how the family dynamics of Afghanistan basically is. To the next slide, I think Nick, if you could, Mr. Nick, if you could talk about the emotional well-being.
Yeah, thank you, Riyasat, for adding those things. And so I think there are a few more things that, if you like, I can touch on that. It is related to the Afghan women. So it's Afghan women normally avoid. It is also part of the culture. It is good to know that Afghan women normally avoid shaking hand with the opposite gender. So some women prefer to shake hand. If a woman extends her hand, please do not hesitate to shake her hand. You know, it will be disrespectful if a woman extends her hand and the individual stand holding his hand on their chest. So this is also, we should. It is good to know about the gender issues in Afghan culture. The other things is I think it is also good to know that Afghans are typically following instruction, but may not follow them if they are told or ordered to do so. So it is general in Afghanistan. If you order the people of Afghanistan to do this, to do that, they don't do it. But you have to find out how to be friends with these people and how to give them a guidance properly. And then it is easy to work with them, and they can follow their job, and it is easy for you and for them to get in agreement to do something in proper ways. For example, if a husband does not agree with the wife to take class, it would be better to offer free children during the classes. It would make sense for the man to understand that if the wife is educated and if she has license to drive, it would allow him to work and let the wife to help with the shopping and medical appointment and take the kids to the childcare to bring from the school. So it's gonna help that. So it is good to know about that. So I think these are the most important things as I described. If there is anything else, Riyasat, you can help me, or if there is any other things left behind that we have to. I don't know how much time I do have.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I just want to add a small point on the emotional well-being part. That just like, you know, and I don't know if the word is toxic masculinism, that, you know, men cannot talk about their emotions. So just like in the US, Afghanistan is pretty similar. Men usually tend to bottle up, I guess, their emotions, and usually do not feel comfortable expressing it. And again, the sign is that if you express your emotions in front of your children, or if you know, break down and cry, it is considered as a part of not rather weakness, but as in you don't want to worry your child that you're in a state, and rather, you know, make them feel like they don't have anybody to take care of. So it is a bit stigmatized, but again, you know, these Afghan refugees that are coming from to US, they're slowly realizing that the variable environment around them is different. So suppose if somebody sort of cried in Afghanistan, you know, the men usually will around be like, no, sob it up, like, you're fine, you'll be fine, you just need to like hold on together. But if they're around an environment where showing emotion is acceptable, I think just like any other human, we long for that kind of sort of like gathering. So while this is a weird topic to talk to them about, I think most of the Afghans that I talk to, they are pretty open about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Riyasat. And there is one more thing I would like to add here, if I have time. So it is Afghan society is really hierarchy society. People respect their elders. And it is not the only elders of within their families, but they also respect elders, men and women in general, particularly who are living in the same areas. If you are living in an area, you have the neighbor, it is the first teaching of the parents for the kids that you have to respect for the elders, especially your neighbor. So we have a proverb in Afghanistan that first God and the second your neighbor, you have to respect for that. So these are the cultures, these are the things that I share with you guys. Tiana, if you have anything else, if there is any question, I will come back and if I have time.
Great. Well, thank you, Nick and Risa, for going over some of the social and cultural considerations when working with populations from Afghanistan. I encourage everyone to type in any questions they have in the chat box, and we'll get to them during the Q&A panel session in today's presentation. I wanted to just lead you with those main points that we covered here before we break for 10 minutes. So again, when it comes to interethnic considerations, remember that Afghanistan is a diverse country. There are more than 19 different ethnic groups that each have distinct histories and rich cultures. So it's difficult to say, this is what the people you're working with, because it's going to vary drastically, just as it would when you're seeing different families in America. But for language considerations, Dari and Pashto are the two official languages of Afghanistan. So Dari is a Persian dialect that has similarities to Farsi, but Pashto is a completely different language. So keep this in mind when you're trying to connect to an interpreter for the intake interviews. For gender dynamics, in some Afghan communities, men might expect their wives to stay home, but some Afghan women may not want to visit or work in an environment that has a majority male workforce. So this is really pointing to that it might be about someone's comfortability going somewhere where men are working. So to take that into consideration, especially those male county office assistant staff when working with women. For family dynamics in Afghanistan, male members of the household may have had exclusively managed the household finances in Afghanistan, but that does not mean that women were not involved in the finances. So most Afghan families discuss household finances between spouses and make joint decisions for spending and saving. So when you're having a discussion about household finances during the intake interview, we definitely encourage you to include both members of the family. And in terms of emotional well-being, both men and women may feel uncomfortable with emotional health issues in front of their spouses, or just in general with someone that they don't know. So it's best to have these conversations one-on-one and try to destigmatize the idea of mental health or the concept of seeking counseling. And that's why we encourage you to use the terminology emotional well-being instead of mental health, which carries a lot of those stigmatizations. Wonderful. So we're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break. Research shows that breaks improve your ability to process and retain information. So take this time to take care of any personal needs you may have. What I will do right now is share a timer so we can all know when we have to be back. It's 2:20 right now. So we'll continue the presentation at 2:30, and I encourage all of you to make the best use of this time.